Hello, EDL 602 students. This is your week 2 update video of all the things that are expected for this week. Week 2 is for the week of January 19th through the 25th, and this is your instructor weekly video. You should have found it underneath the weekly video tab. So for this week, let's just jump into the expectations. So, one being your focus is going to be domains 1 and 2, which is chapter 1 and 2. For domain 1, you're looking at a data driven focus on school improvement. And for chapter 2, domain 2 is your focus, which is instruction of a valuable and guaranteed curriculum. So you will read those two chapters in order to assist you in doing your Dropbox assignment for the week. I want to get to the Dropbox and just kind of go through the expectations for this particular assignment. So with that being said, you will have your first written assignment due on Sunday, January 25th at 11:59 and 59 seconds. Remember from our Zoom call, if this assignment is turned in late, then it will be considered late at 12 o'clock a.m. on January 26th. Now, let's jump into what the expectations are for this assignment. So, the purpose of this assignment is to challenge you to engage deeply with the Marzano and Carbo's leadership model. And with that, you're going to take a realistic school leadership scenario and you're going to think critically about it. And we're going to do a strategic plan to assist with it. Now, this is going to go beyond you just summarizing what you read from the text. So rather than, simply answering the questions that we'll talk about, you are going to have to analyze a hypothetical school scenario. And then for this, you will craft a leadership action plan based on the concepts from domains 1 and 2. So let's look at it. You have three scenarios that you're going to actually look at or choose from, better stated. Three scenarios you'll choose from. One is a high poverty urban rural elementary school with declining math and literacy scores. And for this one, you can't just focus on math or focus on literacy. You have to speak about improving both, right? And so the second scenario is a suburban middle school experiencing wide achievement gaps between student subgroups. So when you get your data and you look at it, you see your overarching score, and then you see the growth of all, and then you see growth of your bottom quartile or your bottom 25. A lot of schools call them least performing students. But then you take that data and you break it down even further and you look at your subgroups. Because some of your subgroups, let's just talk about subgroups. You could have your African Americans, your ELs, your special education population. Those are all considered subgroups, your white students, population of people. If you have one subcategory that isn't growing in comparison to the all, then that's going to be an area of concern. That is a subgroup. That's how many schools get into what is called ATSI. All the other students who are that are growing, they're growing at one speed, but then you have a subgroup that's not growing at all, or they're growing a whole lot slower than the all. So that's what that means. Now, if you're looking at doing the scenario for an urban rural high school struggling with curriculum alignment and inconsistent instruction, then that's when you start looking at a department in high school. So if I have a math department and I have, say, three teachers teaching algebra 2, Well, in one class, the students are performing very poorly. And then in another class, I have students that are excelling. That's when you start looking at curriculum alignment. What rigor are we teaching kids? Are we teaching to the test? And that's why we're getting such great scores. Are we actually teaching the curriculum to the depth of knowledge that it calls for? And you're going to talk about that or you're going to discuss that in your answer when you look at the two questions that are presented. So for your assignment for domains 1 and 2, you're going to answer questions. One being, what would an administrator do to ensure that planning decisions are based on the specific school's data to improve student achievement? So if I had picked a high poverty urban rural elementary school with declining math and literacy scores, I'm going to take that scenario and I'm going to answer the question of what, as an administrator, what can I do to ensure that planning decisions are based on specific school data to improve student achievement? You have to take the scenario and answer the question based off what is written in your textbook. What is it that Marzano and Carbo tells us is best practices? And then the second part is, as a leader, how does one ensure that each student receives a viable and guaranteed curriculum? So if I'm staying with my declining math and literacy scores, I need to figure out what is it that Marzano and Carbo says will help these students receive a viable and guaranteed curriculum that will help my declining math and literacy scores. So make sure when you answer the questions, you are taking it back to the scenario and wrapping all that up together. Now, as we look at this, you are only to have 2 pages for your written response. And then you have to have a cover sheet as well as a reference page. So it's 4 pages in essence, but only 2 of those pages are where you've answered the questions. I always kind of like to keep the rule of thumb. Question 1 page, question 2 2nd page, and then my cover and my reference. There are no points for going over and above and beyond and saying, oh, I'm going to just keep typing until I get this answered the way I want to, because all honesty, you lose points for that. So try to be as concise and in depth with your responses and keep them to 2 pages. Now, let's look at what this says. You will need an in-text citation for the information you provide because this is not your information. It was written by the authors of the textbook. So you need to remember to use in-text citations, paraphrase, and in-text citations, direct quotes, and then you have to have a direct citation. I want you to remember APA format. And there are references to APA format if you go back into the modules and look at the reference material that is listed there. Now, for this, you will need an in-text citation for the information you provided because your information should come from the textbook only. Textbook only. I don't need you to read an article and add an article as an in-text citation. I'm not asking you to do all of that. I want your information to come from your textbook. I want you to spend the time to read about the domains and write about them. I don't need another article or anything else. On your reference page, I should see Carbo and Marzano 2018. That's what I'm looking for. All right, so we've talked about that. We'll get down here to the format. The chosen school scenario is listed as the header for the assignment. So I know exactly what scenario I'm going to read about. We are using third person academic tone. So we're not going to say, I will do this. I'm going to fix this. We are going to do this. We're not using that type of verbiage. Academic, third person academic is the school leader will, an administrator will. It has absolutely nothing to do with I, me, or my. That is not academic writing. APA format, guys. Let's keep that in mind. You have to have a cover page, in-text citations, at least two per domain from the textbook, and a reference page. And then use headings to organize your writing and make sure you have answered the requirements. All right, you should be using your own language and analysis. Use at least two in-text citations. If you notice, it's repeated so that you hear it or read it multiple times so that these are not the errors that you make. Now, before I go forward with looking at the rubric, your final submission should be written in your voice and based directly on your understanding of the textbook. Please don't use Google. Excuse me. Google makes mistakes, and then if you plagiarize or is AI generated content, these things won't be accepted, and all you're going to do is get to redo the assignment. So please just try not to do those things. You're not going to simply restate the domains and the elements because you're going to tie them back to your scenario. So please make sure you're following the format that is listed. Everything you need is in the textbook. Alrighty, let's look at our rubric briefly. I grade based off of this rubric. Everything you see me grade will be based off of your rubric. And it says domain one, a data-driven focus. If you want 20 points, the information you provide should be specific from your resource, which is your textbook. It should have strategies that would guide decision making with data to improve student achievement. If you want 20 points, you will answer that, you will tie it back to your scenario, and that's how you'll get 20 points. Same thing for domain two, your viable and guaranteed curriculum. The information you provide is specific and it has strategies that will help ensure a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Now, let's look at our formatting area. The formatting is important. Are you grammatically correct in your writing? And does the information correlates with the domains? And guys, no more than 5 to 9, I'm sorry, no errors. But the one thing I want you to pay attention to, you have the necessary in-text citations. There is a reference page for a total of no more than 4 pages submitted for this assignment. That is the expectation. Hopefully, there are no questions about that, and you can make sure that that's what you've turned in. Now, once you drop that in that Dropbox, I want you to draw your attention here. I've already said that every assignment has to have a cover page. It should be the William Carey's approved cover page. And there is a template in the resources. Now, the data analysis project, part one, is not due until February 15th. Your goal at this current moment is to not wait to the last minute to seek data. If you have it because you're a subject area teacher, you are 100% okay. But for those of you that do not teach a tested subject area, you need to spend this time collecting data. Don't wait till the week of and start finding it and don't have the right thing. So go ahead now while you have the time to kind of vet it to make sure it's going to provide what you need. Go ahead now and start looking. Well, not looking, but speaking with your school test coordinator or your district test coordinator or your principal to see what kind of data you have available to you. That is itemized data to the standards, okay? Now, that's that big thing with that. Part two of your assignment is not due to March 1st. When we meet for on February 14th, we are gonna deep dive into your data part two. So that's the actual class that we'll get into what I expect for part two of your SMART Goals assignment. I will discuss week 3 with you on the next instructor's video. Lost my train of thought there. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to share is just looking back at our PowerPoint from Saturday and just going back through what the big ideas are for domain one. A data-driven focus on student instruction, student achievement. A data-driven focus on student achievement. You have to use multiple data sources, guys, to know if a student is moving in the right direction. And I always say multiple data sources. As a literacy specialist, I never looked at tested, like the tested things, the grade book. I always wanted to look at our universal screener, which is our NWEA, and I wanted to look at our benchmark testing, which was at back in the day was Case 21, now is MVP. If your school uses iReady for universal data and LMS for the benchmark, then those are two different sets of data that you can look at as an administrator. But always think about it from that stance. And Carbo and Marzano do a fabulous job talking about the many data sources and how they can be utilized. You're always going to want to set measurable achievement goals. You need to have measurable achievement goals. We can't have, okay, we're going to move from 450 to 550. That's not, it's really not, it's not achievable in a 1 year span unless you got a whole new crop of children and they all got it going on. But you got to monitor your progress regularly to make sure you are moving towards your goal, as well as adjust your instruction based on the results. If I see that my kiddos don't need a whole unit on summarizing, I can take that and then start working on something else, maybe summarizing or analyzing two texts, something more complex, always going back to the standard that they have been successful in, but layering the difficulty on. So we're going to always adjust instruction based on our results to make sure we are going in the right direction for our kids' achievement to be improved. Now, when we start talking about domain two, remember if you go back to our class on Saturday, I said a curriculum is not the book you purchased. The curriculum is the Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards. That is what students are expected to know by the end of each grade level. And that is clearly identified. It is essential. We know what we're to teach. We have to allocate the amount of time needed for instruction to be sufficient for student growth. We have to ensure that there is consistency across classrooms. I always say horizontal alignments is the first thing because you got to make sure if you have three teachers teaching the same thing, that it is being taught to the level of rigor that is what your expectation is. Your level of rigor has to be known to all in order to make sure that there is consistency across classrooms. You also have to be able to eliminate gaps and redundancies in instruction. If there are gaps in the learning where we taught this, but we skipped this and we're going to go back to this and not this, that's a gap in learning. And then teaching the same thing over and over. Redundancy, if it's not helping to improve instruction, we should not be teaching those things. That is just a recap of what we discussed in our Saturday class for domains 1 and 2, just to kind of help you get your mind, wrap your head around having to write your paper on domains 1 and 2. Please remember to go back and tie it to your scenario. If you have any questions, concerns, remember, do not inbox me in Canvas. I am not on Canvas every day. I don't even have it up and or open every day. I generally go to Canvas when I'm getting ready to grade. So if you have a question, email me your question. Give me about 24 hours if you've not heard from me. If it's something you need an answer to right now, give me about 24 hours. If you haven't gotten a response, follow up. Follow up. I teach this class, but I also run a school with a lot of emails. So it's not that I don't want to give you a response. It's probably I read it. I'm waiting to respond when I get home or anything that, can come in and interrupt my train of thought and I don't get it, your question answered. So you don't hurt my feelings if you send a follow-up. Please don't forget to do that. But that's all I have for week 2. Be on the lookout next week this week for your week 3 instructors video. Any questions you may have, I'm just an email away. Thank you, and you guys have a lovely week.